Dipa Ma, Part 1, Dipa Ma's Extraordinary Life. Chapter 1, Born into Buddhism. Quote, "There is nothing to cling to in this world." Nani Bala Barura was born on March 25, 1911, in an East Bengal village near the Burmese border. The Chittagong region was notable for its mix of religious traditions, with Hindus, Muslims, and Buddhists living harmoniously side by side. The indigenous Buddhist culture there is perhaps the only extant community dating back to the Buddha in an unbroken line. Nani's family belonged to the Bengali Barua clan, descendants of the original Buddhists of India. Although the practice of meditation had mostly faded away by the time Nani was born, some families still observed Buddhist rituals and customs. Among them were her father, Pumachandra Barua, and her mother, Prasanna Kumari. The eldest of 6 children, Nani was close to her siblings and the favorite child in her extended family. Nani and her mother, both very short and fair-skinned, enjoyed an especially close relationship. Nani remembered her mother as a quiet and affectionate person, her father as a man of firm principle who never yielded to anything he didn't think was right. In spite of his stern manner, Nani's relationship with him was also one of fondness. The tradition of dana, generosity, was commonly practiced in Nani's home, with her parents giving to Buddhist monks, Hindu Brahmins, and anyone else who asked for alms. It was from her parents that the young girl learned the meaning of giving to others, that when you give, there's no distinction. You give to everybody. As a child, Nani showed an exceptional interest in Buddhist ritual. She enjoyed going to temples and serving the monks. Although children were usually kept away from the monks on their begging rounds, because of her strong fascination, Nani was allowed to offer them food and alms, wash their feet, and sit with them while they ate. Nani kept to herself and did not seek the company of other children. She often played with dolls, but she was particularly fond of making Buddha statues. While most little Indian girls were pretend cooking, her fantasy world involved creating food offerings and collecting flowers for the Buddha, preparing the altar, and performing religious ceremonies. The Barua household was near a lake with a brightly colored pagoda at one end, and Nani often went there to make offerings. She recalled that her devotion came naturally, that her parents by no means urged it upon her. Not only did Nani show no interest in cooking, but she showed little interest in eating. Rarely could her perplexed mother coax Nani to sit down to a regular meal. Instead, Nani would eat a piece of fruit or a biscuit. She often asked her parents, "Do you feel hungry? What is hunger?" Her appetite for knowledge, on the other hand, was insatiable. Although it was not customary for girls in her village to go to school, Nani could not be kept away. Even when she was ill and told to stay home for the day, she would steal off to the classroom. Evenings often found her sitting around the table with her father, engaging him in discussion about her school texts, although most children rarely brought their studies home. In the India of the time, a girl's childhood ended early. Those who did attend school were not allowed to continue after the 5th grade. In accordance with the terms of her culture, Nani was to be married before the onset of menstruation. Thus, at the age of 12, she was taken from school and married to a man of 25. Her fiancé, Rajani Ranjan Barua, was an engineer from the neighboring village of Silgata. As was the custom, after the marriage ceremony, Nani was immediately sent to live with her new in-laws. She missed her parents terribly. To make matters worse, 1 week after they were married, her husband left to resume his job in Burma. Nani was left alone with her demanding in-laws, of whom she was quite afraid. She was allowed occasional visits to her parents, but then her in-laws would take her away again. After 2 unhappy years, at age 14, Nani was put on a boat to Rangoon, now Yangon, to begin a life in a new country with a man whom she had known for no more than a week. Stepping off the boat, the timid country girl was shocked by her new surroundings. Rangoon was a noisy, strange place with a sea of unfamiliar faces and a language she could not understand. Nani was extremely lonely at first, frequently crying for her homeland and her family. Married life too presented challenges. Although she had been carefully instructed by her mother and aunts about how to run a household, no one had ever said a word about sex. Her husband was the first to tell her, and the girl's reaction was to feel shocked, nervous, and terribly ashamed. For the first year of married life, she was terrified of her husband. During that year, Rajani remained unfailingly gentle and supportive of his wife, never forcing himself on her. Eventually, as trust developed between them, Nanny came to see him as a rare human being. Over the next few years, the two of them fell deeply in love. In later years, Nanny often said that she considered Rajani her first teacher. Their happy relationship, however, was marred by one extremely painful problem. The traditional expectation for a young Indian wife is that she bear a child, preferably a son, within the first year of marriage. But year after year passed without Nanny conceiving. She tried going to doctors and healers, but no one could find the reason for her inability to conceive. This became a source of great shame and sorrow to her. Fortunately, Rajani remained caring, loving, and patient, without ever pushing Nanny or criticizing her for failing to bear a child. Although Rajani accepted the absence of offspring, his family and neighbors in India did not. Concerned that Nanny was ruining their lineage, they lured Rajani back to Chittagong under the pretext of an illness in the family. Once home, Rajani was informed that a new wife was waiting for him, and that arrangements had been made for him to marry immediately. Rajani refused. When I married Nanny, he informed his relatives, I did not tell her that she must have children or I would leave her. This was not a condition of our marriage. Therefore, it is not fair that I should leave her now. Rajani returned to Burma and told Nanny never to worry again about having children. He suggested that she treat every person she met as her own child, advice that would manifest in remarkable ways many years later. At the age of 18, Nanny learned that her mother had died suddenly. Despite having had a premonitory dream of her mother's death, she was terribly shocked by the news. She'd seen her mother only twice since moving to Burma. The heartache of that loss was to remain with her for many years. Then, immediately following her mother's death, Nanny was stricken with typhoid fever. The disease was misdiagnosed and mistreated, and Nanny was hospitalized for many months. Nanny's mother left behind an 18-month-old boy named Bijoy. Her father, unable to care for the baby, offered Nanny and Rajani the chance to bring up this youngest brother as their own child, and Bijoy was sent to live with them in Rangoon. Nanny and Rajani were actively involved in the Buddhist community. In addition to following the 5 Buddhist precepts, to refrain from killing and causing harm, from taking what isn't freely offered, from sexual misconduct, from false speech, and from using intoxicants, they maintained daily rituals, chanting the sutras, teachings, sponsored 2 community feasts a year, and offered alms to the local monks. They were especially known for their generosity. They paid for the schooling of children from needy families, and offered their own home as shelter for the homeless. From the day she arrived in Rangoon, Nanny felt a strong desire to meditate. Even though girls typically did not study meditation, she repeatedly asked Rajani for permission to learn it. Each time she asked, he would suggest that she wait until she was older, following the traditional Indian custom of postponing spiritual practice until later years when the householder's duties are fulfilled. Although she spoke no Burmese, Nanny found ways to pursue a Buddhist education in her adopted country. Whenever she could find a Bengali religious book, she would read and study it on her own. For other books, she enlisted the help of her 13-year-old nephew, Sunil, who would translate the classical Buddhist texts from Burmese to Bengali. Sunil was astonished by Nanny's studiousness. And how well she remembered everything that he read to her. Years later, when she had completed a battery of psychological tests, her intelligence was found to be highly exceptional. In 1941, when Nanny was 30, Burma was attacked and occupied by Japanese troops. It was a time of fear, scarcity, and hardship. At the war's end in 1945, Bijoy, now grown, returned to India to start his own family. With an empty house and both parents dead, Nanny thought, now must be the time to learn meditation. Then a miracle occurred. After more than 20 years of trying to conceive a child, Nanny discovered that she was pregnant. She was 35 years old when she joyfully gave birth to a baby girl. After 3 months, however, the child sickened and died. Overwhelmed with grief, Nanny developed heart disease. 4 years later, she was blessed with another pregnancy. Again, it was a girl, whom she named Dipa. It was at this time that Nanny was given her nickname, Dipa Ma, or Mother of Dipa. Since Dipa means light, Nanny's new name also meant Mother of Light. Dipa was a healthy toddler when her mother became pregnant yet again, this time with the all-important boy child. This infant died at birth, once more plunging Dipa Ma into inconsolable grief. In desperation, she demanded the right to learn meditation to relieve her sorrow. Again, her husband said that she was too young. She threatened to sneak out of the house, and Rajani and several neighbors began to keep watch over her. Their vigil soon became unnecessary. Stricken with hypertension, Dipa Ma wasn't able to leave her bed, much less the house, for several years. During that period, she fully expected to die at any moment. Single-handedly, Rajani nursed his wife and took charge of toddler Dipa, while continuing to work full-time as an engineer. The stress of the situation eventually overwhelmed him. One night in 1957, he came home from work and told his wife that he was feeling ill. Within hours, he was dead of a heart attack. End of Chapter 1.